If you're talking to a church planter and limited resources, limited concept of what team is yet, maybe even planting solo, what would you say about that first hire? What would you tell a young church planter or a church planter in general about the first hire? Whoever wants to start. Larry, you pretty much have to start every time because, the rest of us are just going to be.
I would look at your church and I would ask these two questions. Where do we have a potential fatal flaw? If we don't fix it, we're going to flame out. Or where do we have a golden opportunity? And you hire to those two things. And preferably you hire to opportunity. But if you have a fatal flaw, you better fix it or you'll die. So my first hire, the next hire, who by the way is still with me to this day, but they were built for opportunities. We were a very young church, and therefore I wasn't going to have a lot of 50-year-olds with junior high and high school kids listen to what I had to say in their life. They'd pat me on the head when I agreed with them and say, well, he'll grow out of it when they disagreed with me. So at that point, we realized our golden opportunity was all these young people that were coming to hear a 28-year-old pastor. Well, what will young families do with just one or two kids? They'll get in small groups, and they have little kids. So when Mike Yearley, he was with me 20 years, when he was hired, his job was to preach some, give me some margin, and then the other thing was, you're going to create the greatest Sunday morning experience for kids with lay leaders you'll empower, and you're going to start small groups, and you are not allowed to do anything with junior high, high school, or these other areas where people want us to do stuff, because bottom line, we can only be pedestrian there, but we have this huge opportunity. And then somewhere around 300, about 3 years later, we had 8 people in our junior high and high school ministry, and we were a church of 320 or something. Well, at that point, it was becoming a fatal flaw because our 5th and 6th graders were about to graduate, and so we hired a youth person. So for me, it's unique. It's not a role as much as what is God doing, and how can we hitch up our sails to where the wind of the Spirit is blowing, and that will be a different answer for every church.
I think another thing is important when you're looking at staff and lay leadership. So a lot of you are working with your churches with lay people because you don't have the opportunity to have paid staff. And I think in leadership and in paid staff, what's important is we talk a lot about competency and character and chemistry on your team. And I think I've added a third one to what people talk about in that area. And I think place in life is really important. Not that they've, achieved everything and done everything and then are going to impart their wisdom on you, but ministry is not therapy either. It's a fishbowl to the world, and so everything that is not right in you gets exposed when you're in ministry full time, and you want to know that people are far enough away from their pain than closer to it. They understand what their brokenness is because we're all broken, and they can relate to that, and they understand, they've lived through some failures, and they've overcome those or identified those and have grown through that. And so I think that place in life where they're at is as important. How do they manage their work-life balance? What are their spiritual disciplines like? Those are some really good vetting questions as you're looking to place not just a friend on your team, but somebody that's right for the role.
I don't know what I would say exactly first hire should be. I think it would depend on the situation. My first hire, I hired a worship pastor who founded the church with me, or just a couple of months after I started core group development, came in and was a founding elder with me. That went great for about 3 years. He was with us for about 5.5 years. And so that wasn't the best decision. But one of the things Larry said earlier that has really resonated with me was, or at least this way I understood it, a lot of times you make decisions based off the moment and the immediate next steps. And 4 steps down the road, that may turn out to be a bad decision, but it's the only decision you can make for now. And so, or it seems that way. So I've had to learn that. But I think my advice would be, don't hire as quickly as you feel like you need to, and wait as long as you absolutely can. Our first staff was about 12 to 15 people of volunteers. And those people gave anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week to the church plant. And I think they ingrained a DNA in us that was much stronger 10 years in, because that's how church gets done at Life Point. And that's a standard that I could not have implemented later, but they developed because they willingly gave it.
My guess is my first job was at Ponderosa Steakhouse. I'm not, how many, did any of you guys ever eat at Ponderosa? Kind of an old, the cheese sauce there is awesome. And but anyway, my guess is a lot of your first church jobs were like a Ponderosa restaurant interview. The pastor spent a couple hours with you, and for me, first 2 youth pastor jobs, if I look like I could relate to students and could communicate some semblance of Scripture, that then I was hired, and that was the case. I mean, 2 jobs after a 3-hour interview. So I think after that experience, I went to kind of the other side. I started overcompensating. Loyalty is big for me. Want to be on a team with guys who really seem bought into the vision, and even at first planted with a great friend who just a huge, awesome, great leader, great pastor, and ended up sending him out. And after the 2 of us, I think we hired based on loyalty, and not necessarily on even what you were describing earlier, not necessarily on gifting. I believe time reveals a lot of things, and so we had spent a lot of time, but we hired, I think, on someone that seemed loyal and someone that seemed like they were vested, and not someone that maybe could help us get to the next step. And when you're young, a young planter, I planted when I was 25, and my co-pastor was 24. We were young. I'm still in diapers. So there's a lot of fears. There's a lot of insecurity that you're battling with. I would really encourage the young church planter, don't hire simply on loyalty, on someone that, man, this dude is going to be a band of brother. He's going to sit in the trench with me. It's not enough. And at the same time, you do want loyalty to be a characteristic trait of those men or women. But I don't know. It just, for me, that was a huge learning experience. Did you ever, was that ever a tension as you grew, as you had folks around you guys?
Well, we were almost 3,000 before we hired somebody from outside. So we were really big. And in fact, sadly, to our shame, we were arrogant about that. We look at churches that didn't hire from inside. And so all hell broke loose when suddenly we were so big that we couldn't find somebody inside for this. Take a look at a local college, where I'm at. USC and UCLA have lots of high school quarterbacks that go there, but they're not Division I level. And if you're going to play in Division I, you're going to have to recruit. And so we woke up one day, suddenly realized the move from junior high intern to running the whole thing was a bigger leap than it used to be. One thing about hiring from within is when you hire from within, you're not getting a mercenary, and you know what you're getting, because a resume always looks better than a real person. So I encourage you, I would rather hire a B plus, not a B plus person I know rather than an A I don't know. Because that loyalty factor is important. The problem is, here's what you don't know, and push back if I'm wrong on this, but maybe it wasn't so much you put too much emphasis in loyalty, you just didn't realize what you were going to need at the next level. And sometimes what I would have is I had people who could play really well at one level, but when we grew to the next level, it hit their leadership lid. Now, in our case, the reason we haven't fired much is we've been able to lattice work people to different roles and find where they fit, and somehow they want to stay. So we must have a fairly healthy culture, I guess, or whatever. But, I hire for today's and tomorrow's opportunity. I really have no clue what next year's is. And whenever we have planning meetings to plan out 3 years, when we get to year 2, it's like, oh, screw that. It's all messed up. Because life never follows those kind of plans.